Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Let me introduce myself. My name is Hardiana from PBIB 2018. In this video, I will answer the questions related to the topic Understanding the Concepts of Discourse Analysis in Section 2, Part 1. The first question is, why should we learn the genesis of discourse analysis? Please explain your answers. Why should we learn the genesis of discourse analysis? Because we must know the history of the development and use of language by residents of native speakers. By studying the genesis of discourse analysis, we can see the process of how discourse analysis appears in linguistic studies, and also the development of discourse analysis theory is strongly influenced by the development of linguistics theory, which has undergone three stages of development. There are traditional grammar, structuralism, and functionalism. The second question is, do you agree with saying that development of discourse analysis theory is strongly influenced by the development of linguistics theory? Why? Explain the reason for your position. I agree, because universally discourse analysis is the main linguistics of study that examines the use of language by native speakers, both spoken and written. So the development of discourse analysis theory is very much influenced by the development of linguistics theory. It can also be said that linguistics theory is what gave birth to discourse analysis theory. The third question is, what do you know of traditional grammar theory? Please explain your answer to these questions by referring to these things. First, what is traditional grammar theory? Traditional grammar theory is the study of the structure and formation of words and a sentence, without paying attention to sound and meaning. As we know that grammar is a branch of science of science that studies the rules that govern the use of language. Grammar is the science of linguistics, or the study of language, and morphology is the field of linguistics or grammar that studies the formation of words or morphemes in a language. Morphology is also called a form system, and morpheme is a unit of speech that has a grammatical or lexical meaning that participates in the formation of words or becomes part of the word. Meanwhile, syntax is the science of the principles and rules for making a sentence. In addition, a syntax is also useful for referring directly to a rule or principle that includes a sentence structure in a language. Next, the second question. What is the main principle of this theory? The main principle of traditional grammar theory is that grammar reflects the prescriptive view that one dialect or variety of language should be valued higher than others and should become the norm for all speakers of the language. The prescriptive approach is an approach that views language. In sociolinguistics, prescriptivism is a term that refers to the practice of compiling norms and guidelines for the use of natural language with the intention of the influencing speakers to adhere to the proposed pattern. These rules can regulate various aspects of language such as pronunciation, inflection, semantics, syntax, and so on, as well as linguistics elements such as spelling and punctuation. Therefore, in teaching a language, the teacher must make certain language rules and absolute reference that all learners of that language must fully learn and follow. Students are only allowed to speak in accordance with the sound patterns, words, and sentence structures of the search language, and students are prohibited from using language patterns that are not in accordance with the reference language. Next, the third question. What do teachers who adopt the principle do in teaching a language? Teachers who adopt the principle of a prescriptive approach conduct a series of studies to show the types and categories of common mistakes made by students in the use of English by emphasizing several important things such as spelling standards, grammar or syntax, or rules about what is considered socially or practically correct, and pay attention to grammar as a correct language language art that must be mastered both in speech and writing. And next questions is, what are the product of this theory? The product of traditional grammar theory is Murray's English Grammar by Lanley Murray, uh, which is one of the most powerful works on grammars in the 18th century, published in 1794. And the five questions is, what is the main shortcoming of this theory? The main shortcoming of traditional grammar theory is its own main principle, that is the prescriptive approach, because linguists believe that using this approach is not strong enough to develop students' language knowledge and skills, because the focus is limited to the language referred to or claimed to be standard language, which consequently creates language knowledge. Learners are isolated by the standard language components. Then the linguist suggested to the English teachers to use a descriptive approach rather than a prescriptive approach, because using a descriptive approach allows students to investigate language at a deeper level, allows students to analyze real samples of mixed varieties of language dialects, and does not only focus on explanation of predetermined language. And the last questions from the third questions, that is, what are grammar translation method and its relation to the traditional grammar theory? The grammar translation method is a method of foreign or second language teaching which makes use of tradition and grammar study as the main teaching and learning activities, and focus on the written form rather than the spoken form. Traditional grammar theory is related to the grammar translation method because traditional grammar theory inspired the birth, birth of a grammar translation method in language pedagogy. The characteristics of the grammar translation method, there are first, the main objectives of teaching foreign language is to read written text instead of spoken language. The second, the main activities in class is translating a foreign language into the mother tongue. Third, students need a lot of time to be able to communicate in foreign language. Next, teacher sentence, teacher centered, um, and next, students are required to understand language forms such as vocabulary, pronunciation, and grammar correctly. And the last, teachers must speak foreign language during class and correct students' language forms. The fourth question is, what do you know of structuralism theory? Please explain your answer to these questions by referring to these things. First, What is structuralism theory and what does the Saussure say about the structure of language? Structuralism theory focuses on examining language as a static, uh, static system of interconnected units. De Saussure argued that language was formed by scene, which finally produced parole or speech or utterance. And utterance is understood as a meaningful event that is governed by a pre-existing scene system. Scenes have two components. There are first signified or abstract ideas or concepts and markers or a means to express what is signal, for example, a perceived sound. In other words, a scene is a combination of scenes and marker to get its meaning. Therefore, two different languages have different words to describe the same idea or concept. Next, the second is what are the main principles of this theory? In the theory of structuralism, there are three principles. The first is oral language is the main and written language is the second. The second, using a descriptive approach. And the last, requires students to learn language skills as a whole system. Therefore, students needs a language search component to be imitated in order to build student skills in foreign language. Next question is what is informant method and what is its relationship to the structuralism theory? The audiolingual method, also known as the informant method, is an informant who uses native speakers of the language that functions as a search of phrase, vocabulary, and provides sentence to be imitated. The relationship between the informant method and structuralism theory is that linguists have the duty to supervise the teaching and learning process even though they don't know anything about the target language, but linguists are trying to get the basic structure of the target language from the informant. Through these activities, students and linguists gradually learn how to speak the target language and understand basic grammar. Next question is uh, Next question is what are the characteristics of the method? The characteristic of this method is first, language is everything that native speakers say. Uh, the second, primary activity in the classroom is drilling. Third, requires the habit of using foreign language by imitating, repeating the use of language component continuously until the students is accustomed to expressing everything using the foreign language that has been learned. Fourth, the teacher directs students to practice the same sentence over and over again so that students get used to the sentence. Next, the teacher is a model that students will imitate. And the last, to acquire communication skills, students will go through a long, tedious, repetitive process and rigorous practice. And the next question is what is the main shortcoming of this theory? The main shortcoming of structuralism theory is an analysis of annoyance because students must speak a foreign language according to the language structure and use the correct language patterns according to the original speakers or native speakers, and teachers are also required to prevent and correct when students make mistakes when speaking in order to avoid the fossilization of errors as a result of letting the students accustomed to making errors. Next question is, what is error analysis and what is its relation to the structuralism theory? Error analysis deals with the compilations, study, and analysis of error made by second language learners and aims to investigate aspects of second language acquisition. The relationship between structuralism theory and error analysis is a structuralism theory that focuses on examining language both orally and in writing uh, and in language examination, and error analysis is carried out to provide information on errors made by students while speaking. Next, the fifth questions. What do you know of functionalism theory? Please explain your answer to these questions by referring to these things. The first, what is functionalism theory and what does Chomsky say about language? Functionalism theory is a language study approach or communication system which consists of form and function components students must learn as knowledge. Chomsky rejects all kinds of structuralism theory of language learning, which claims language is a habit structure that is taught by presenting stimuli and response, reinforcement, and association, because sentence in human language were not learned by imitation and repetition but generated from the learner's underlying competence. The second question is, what are differences between Chomsky's view and Himes about language? Chomsky's claim that sentences in human language were not learned by imitation and repetition, but generated from the learner's underlying competence. The competency in questions in linguistics competence that is related to the abstract ability of speakers that allows students to produce grammatically correct sentence in language, or knowledge of language structures, and the ability to produce and understand sentence in language is called linguistics performance. Uh, Meanwhile, according to Himes, a linguistics theory needs to be seen as a part of a more general theory that combines communication and culture. Himes in this sociolinguistic tradition includes not only grammatical competence, but also sociolinguistics and contextual competence. The understanding of communicative competence, according to Himes, is the knowledge that underlies the speakers about um, grammar rules, including phonology, orthography, syntax, lexicon, and semantics, and the rules of their use in appropriate social conditions. Next, the third question is, what is the main principle of this theory? The theory of functionalism is known as a language study approach which deals with studying the components of form and functions performed by the use of both spoken and written language. Next, for the fourth question is, what is CLT method and its relation to functionalism theory? Communicative language teaching, or CLT, is an approach to the teaching of second and foreign language that emphasizes the interaction as both the means and the ultimate goal of learning a language. It is also referred to as a communicative approach to the teaching of foreign language, or simply the communicative approach. With the emergence of the theory of the communicative approach to language, it is considered as the basis for the birth of the theory of functionalism. And the last questions from the part 5, that is, what the relationship between discourse analysis and functionalism theory. Along with the development of functionalism theory, it has inspired some linguists to conduct research on discourse analysis in an effort to find the social and cultural aspects behind the language used by humans to communicate, where the need for forms and functions the need for forms and functions of information in the social and cultural aspects of language teaching is the background for the emergence of discourse analysis as a discipline used to describe language in a social context, which aims to describe the functions, goals, and hidden concepts in the sentence people use in communicating. Okay, that's all from me. Thank you very much, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.